Hello. How's it been so far today? Loving it? All right, good. Well, my name's Bobby Shell. I work with Voltage, VP of Marketing, and I've enjoyed Bitcoin since 2017 after getting wrecked with all the S coins, as Morgan Richard said. So learned my lesson, and now I work for a Lightning company, have for 2 years. And what I really love about like my Bitcoin journey, because we're supposed to share a little bit of our story or whatever, came in learning about sound money. I think a lot of us go down many rabbit holes when you're in this community, and you learn about a lot more than you really expected whenever you jumped in with this wild group of people. And it's been a lot of fun. And now that I work for a Lightning company, I've started looking at and exploring the value for value side that Christopher Calicott was speaking about earlier. And as a marketer of 12 years, I've always worked with small businesses, which is the backbone of America. And we're seeing this transformation where individuals have what we now call a personal brand. And at the end of the day, every person's a bit of their own business. You have your own identity, and you can either leverage it as a solo entrepreneur or to bring value to the organization you're within. And I have this firm belief, and we're actually seeing this happen at Bitcoin companies, where you want to, especially in a niche industry like this, is you want to hire people who can add value to the organization and bring leads and like bring awareness and get impressions and visibility for your brand. And I have a belief that every single person on the internet in the future, it's not going to be about their resume, it's going to be about the content they create, the website they have, and the influence they have, and that's going to help them get the job, because you can get a better taste and flavor of how people are, who they are, with what they say and do online. And while we all love and value privacy, there's actually a lot of benefits and leverage you get by being present online and being yourself versus being a non. And there's a lot of benefits of being a non, but what I really love about the Lightning Network and Bitcoin is the fact that it gives just individual creators the capability to earn directly from the audience that they're speaking to. And it creates just an insane level of empowerment and just opportunity for these people that can't be censored and can't be stopped, and it allows for just new models and things to happen, and that gets me really excited and really jazzed, and I hope to educate more people about that over the next few years. But enough about my story, because I didn't come here to talk a ton. Today I'm here to introduce Bob Burnett, and this dude has a fascinating story. We got to talk backstage for a few minutes, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy what he has to share today. He actually helped design the world's first laptop back in 1986, so I think you'll be surprised by a lot of just the knowledge that he has and what he's going to pass along. And he was the CTO at a company called Gateway in the 90s, and that was back in the heyday of the PC era. So I think you're going to really enjoy what he's sharing, and more importantly, what he's doing now is he works in the Bitcoin mining space, and he is the CEO and chairman at an organization called Barefoot Mining, and I'm sure he's going to dive into that and share it with you guys, but that's all I really have to say. I hope you guys have fun, and here we have Bob Burnett.
All right. Thank you, Bobby. All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to say some things today that I hope are at least enlightening. Some of them might be controversial. Some of them might actually piss you off. I don't know. But I'm coming to you with some truth, and there are some things happening relative to block space, and specifically block space scarcity, that I don't think have gotten much airtime yet. And so we're going to start walking through that. I think to start with, let's talk a little bit about scarcity. Scarcity, specifically absolute scarcity, really typically has only come through historical means. So for instance, if we have like a 1952 Mickey Mantle baseball card, that card only achieved absolute scarcity through the passage of time. It wasn't absolutely scarce at creation, and it had no value at creation. It was only later in time when that scarcity was recognized. When Satoshi created Bitcoin, he created really the first absolute scarcity at onset. And he did it through the release of the money supply through the halving and the proof of work mechanism. And so I think we all know that we end up at 21 million. But what I think most people don't think about is Satoshi created a second absolute scarcity, and that's block space. If we look at any period of time, let's say 1 year, then the amount of block space available in that window is absolutely scarce. It's finite, and unless you believe that 10-minute block times or 4 million weight unit blocks should be changed, then that's an absolute. So before I get to that, we're going to explain a little bit about block times and a block space. Before I do, though, just a question for you. If I said we're going to have a bet about the time it takes for the next block to process on the network, and I said we're going to put the under over at 8 minutes, how many people are going to pick the under? Raise hands. How many are going to pick the over? Okay, I want to bet with you people. So my team, sometimes, the beauty of the way Bitcoin was created was that we have access to all the data in the world, but it's not always assembled in a manner in which we like. So one of the things I've done with my team is we have gone back to block 1, and we've extracted several dozen pieces of data from every block and assembled them and started to run statistical analysis against them. And one of the interesting conclusions from that was that the median block time is 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Now that's over the last year, but interestingly, it only varies by about 4 seconds if you go all the way back to the beginning. So what that means is, if you're going to bet somebody on the time it takes for the next block to occur, the median, meaning 50% of the time it's faster than this number and 50% of the time it's slower, it's 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Now the average, the mean, is different. That number comes closer to 10 minutes. And so if you go from the beginning of time, you'll see that it's 9 minutes and 34 seconds. More recently, it's 9 minutes and 47 seconds. Now you might say, well, Bob, we're kind of nitpicking about a few seconds, but the reality is those seconds are very important. They add up. So I run a mining company. The faster those block times run, the more blocks per day that come out, and the higher the revenue is. That also means, by the way, that most people think about, you hear about 900 Bitcoin per day released into the supply. That's actually not true. It's more like 919, 920 is more the rate at which Bitcoin enters the money supply. So if you're trying to calculate the inflation rate or something like that, that's more the number that you should use. So you can see on the chart that right now what happens is we get about 147 blocks per day. Historically, we've gotten about 150. Now, if we look at block space, since SegWit, and we won't go into any technical details today, but since SegWit, block space is defined by weight units. And so block space has a maximum of 4 million weight units. And what you see if you look at this chart in that left column, average block weight, is that historically it was kind of empty. But the last 6 months, it's completely full. So we're at 3.97 million average block weight size in every single block. Now, sometimes that's because we couldn't go into the technical details of it. What is it? Well, it's probably easier for people to think in terms of transactions. So what it means is that every block has just under 2,700 transactions right now. That's the average. So if we want to start thinking about what really is the capacity of the network, we have to put these things together. So if we want to look at like what a lower bound is for the throughput of the network in a given year, assuming the network actually hit the 10-minute goal, which it probably never will, by the way, at least as long as hash rate expands, we'll probably always run a little hot, but let's just be conservative with this number. We have 10 minutes. That means there'll be 52,500 blocks processed in the year. And if we take that 2,685 transactions per block, that means we have a network capacity of just over 140 million transactions per year. And if you go back to my original premise, which is let's not screw with block times and let's not screw with block space, certainly fought that war already, that defines the throughput of the network, at least on a lower bound. Now, could we do better? Probably a little bit. If we run a little hot like we have been, and we run at that 947, and people, probably because fees are going up, get a little more efficient in the way that they do their transactions. They consolidate them, they do some of those sort of things. There's probably an opportunity to increase that number by about 50%, which would put us at about 4,000 transactions per block. But still, at the end of the day, what that means, just over 200 million transactions per year is the capability of the network. Now, we have to put this in context. There's 8 billion people in the world. If we have an opportunity for only 200 million base layer interactions per year shared by 8 billion people, and we'll go into this math a little more in a second, we have a problem. If we also consider there are 334 million companies in the world, again, there's a problem. There, by the way, just another interesting stat, there's approximately 600 million entrepreneurs in the world. But a lot of these numbers overlap a little bit. But still, these are very large numbers. And if you're here at a conference like this, you're here like me because you want to see Bitcoin win. You want to see Bitcoin adopted widely across the world and become the money of the future. But we have to face certain realities based on the mathematics and the capabilities of the network. Right now, if we look at self-custody, it's a little difficult to determine how many people actually self-custody, but we can get some metrics. There are 48 million people, or there are 48 million addresses that hold some value of Bitcoin in them. There are 12 million that hold 0.01 Bitcoin or more, which is about $260 worth today. And so what that means is that we're at, even if 100% of those at 0.01 Bitcoin were individuals, we're at a penetration of about 12 million people holding Bitcoin on the base layer. Now that's probably a gross overestimate, but even if it is, that means 0.15% of the world holds money at the base layer. But we also have a mempool. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the mempool is basically where transactions go before they're included in a block. We're stuffed. For the last 6 months, we've been running massive backlogs. If this were a factory, we have orders that we can't fulfill. We have orders that we can't fulfill at a major level. We're sitting right now just under 400,000 transactions hoping to get processed. Now that chart that I'm showing you here also includes fees. So just so as you're looking at it, the bluish kind of numbers are people offering essentially low fees, and those in green are kind of moderate fees, and those in red are kind of high fees. But here's the situation. We said there's 334 million companies in the world. Let's pretend they all adopted Bitcoin tomorrow. Well, if we have somewhere between 150 and 200 million transactions per year, that means essentially each company could do about one base layer transaction every 2 years. If we took it a different fight, said, well, let's not talk about the companies, let's talk about the people. If you had 2% of the population That's about 160 million people globally. That means each person could do one base layer transaction per year. If somebody out there is holding a massive amount of Bitcoin and you wish to, let's say, donate 1,000 sats to every person in the world right now, and you did an individual transaction for that, it would take you 40 years of consuming 100% of the network capacity to do that. So when we look at this, it's not advancing. There we go. Okay. I want to step back with that in mind a little bit and talk about the subsidy. So Bitcoin miners and the network runs on a reward system. Every block rewards the winner of that block with a subsidy plus fees. And I think most people are aware of that, or something like that. Most people are aware that right now that subsidy is 6.25 Bitcoin, that the halving is coming next year, and that number is going to be cut in half. And I think most of the people think about it in the context that, that's the new money coming into the monetary system. That's true, and that's the incentive to the miners. And I think most people stop their thinking right there. But I think Satoshi, part of his genius when he set up Bitcoin was it was more than that. I think other things to benefit the ecosystem were part of that subsidy. One was that it would incentivize people to self-custody. Like, hey, it's there, it's accessible, you can go do it. And therefore it was a way of incentivizing user adoption. I'm older than probably most of the people in the room, but back in the late 70s and the 80s, there used to be these things, Record of the Month Club, and you would get a magazine, People magazine or something like that, and in the back of the magazine, you'd see an ad like you're looking at right here. And it was very alluring. I fell for it over and over and over, frankly. And you could for 1 penny get 13 records or tapes. And that day when those arrived was really exciting. You get this big box, and I always got the records, and it was very exciting. And then the reality of the program would hit in, and you had to buy like 10 more albums over the next 2 years at regular prices. And they were a little overpriced. They weren't horrible, but as a teenager, let's say, I'd have to scrounge the money up to make that happen. But the truth was, what was it? It was a limited time offer. Bitcoin, because of the subsidy, has really been very similar. We've had our introductory period. We've had unlimited access to the world's most secure digital network, virtually for free, whenever we want. And I believe this offer is about to expire, that we're about to enter a new era. And I think that will cause a lot of us to rethink how we interact with Bitcoin, and maybe as we're trying to bring new people in, how we sell them on it. There's a great quote, former British general, that said, "A luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity." And so just to kind of reinforce what I just said, I think that's what we've been living. We've been living in a luxury, again, the world's greatest, most secure digital network available to us at will whenever we want. And we've gotten used to thinking that will always be the case. But here's the reality. I showed you the math before, and this will probably sound sacrilegious. Very few people will be able to hold their own keys. You can't have 8 billion people in a network that processes 200 million transactions a year and have everybody hold their own keys. That doesn't mean I like that, by the way. I'm just telling you what it is. And I believe that we do not want to go through block size wars again. I believe the network was properly shaped but we're in a very select privileged group of people who've had access to this for 15 years. There is a small window still open, but not much. So, a few things to think about for this group. If you have Bitcoin outside of the on-chain system, now's the time to move it in. You can still do it for free at will. But this next part will sound a little funky. If you have money that's on the base layer that you might need instant access to, let's say you know that you're going to purchase a car in a year from now. Well, I can't sit here and guarantee you that you can move money from the base layer at will at a low price a year from now. So you might want to start thinking about whether or not you can find some other place, and I'm not here to tell you what that place is. I really don't know, but you might want to think about where you would move that. Consolidate your UTXOs. I gave you some stats before. There's 48 million addresses that hold some Bitcoin. Only 12 million hold 0.01 or more. That means 36 million addresses hold less than 0.01 Bitcoin. Okay, I don't know who they are. I may even have a couple of them myself. I need to go back and look. But you gotta do the consolidation right now of UTXOs and of stray addresses. The importance of Lightning cannot be overstated. The network cannot grow without Lightning, and we'll talk about this in a minute. In the future, you're going to have to think about base layer interactions well in advance and plan them. And if you're going to want to do 2 or 3, let's say in a given year, I mean, remember you're using a big percentage of the world's bandwidth. How can you consolidate them? Can you do something with 2 inputs and 4 outputs instead of maybe doing them one at a time? And start rethinking some of the messaging to newbies, because I think the ability to self-custody isn't going to be available to everybody at all times. So this is a little chart I put together. I call it Bitcoin purity. And like I say, it feels a little dirty to make something like this, but I feel I have to. So I think we all know that the ETF initiatives are out there in force. Whether you like them or not, they're out there in force. And they might represent the smallest form of Bitcoin ownership. I would say, by the way, even off this chart are things like ownership of like Bitcoin mining companies. That's not a Bitcoin investment. You know, you don't have any title to it. There's not even kind of an indirect inference. And as you move up this table, you'll see, you know, there are I put exchanges in 2 categories: those that have proof of reserves and those that don't. We've got FEDI and that whole initiative, which I think is just like Lightning, absolutely imperative to the growth and success of the network. You have Lightning wallets, and then you have the on-chain. I'm going to shift a little bit to talk about miners and the security of the network. Okay, what did I do? Did I not, that one, you see that? You see the pyramid, like the inverted pyramid? All right, we're going to this one, thank you. Okay, so fees. So you might have heard a lot of people talk about one problem for Bitcoin is the security budget in the future. And the security budget is dependent on fees. As the subsidy goes down, the importance of the fees goes up. This chart right here shows the percentage of revenue for the miners from fees. For the most part, it's held very low. We had a little blip recently. That was the ordinal stuff back in the spring. But interestingly, as chaotic and kind of disjointed as that works, you might find this interesting. It surprised me. If you look at the fees per block, they almost haven't moved over time. So the all-time average fees per block, 0.335 Bitcoin. The last 4 years, 0.315 Bitcoin. And the last 6 months, actually exactly at the all-time average of 0.335. So even though the subsidy has been going down with time, we've had actually pretty consistent behavior as measured in Bitcoin from the fees. So I'm going to skip forward to here. So let's look at this. So this chart shows if we maintain this 0.335 fee rate with the declining halving schedule going forward, and we take, I think, a fairly conservative growth for the average price of Bitcoin over each epoch, starting at 50,000 and ending up at 250,000 in the year 2040, you'll see that the revenue for the miners as measured in fiat doesn't vary wildly. And interestingly, if the same security budget gets applied, because of Moore's law, which basically says the chips get faster and consume less power, even in this scenario, the global hash rate's going to rip. We don't have to worry about the security of the network. Now, if we say because of the crowding of the network and all these transactions that are pouring in, we say, well, maybe we'll finally see a slight uptick in fees. So if over each epoch we see just a 20% growth in fees, then we end up with a security budget by 2040 that's 50% greater than today. So I personally don't see a scenario where we really have to worry about this. So let's kind of wrap up. Fees are going to rip. So I didn't really show that in here. We don't. I personally think what we saw last spring is very indicative of the way the world's going to be in the next epoch, meaning post the halving, that we're going to highly likely to see fees be massively expensive. To the degree all the people in the room here can evangelize and support those in the development community and the Lightning area and the Fediment or other layer 2, layer 3 custodial, we really need to support them because the base layer can't do it. Miners are the gatekeepers of the blocks. And I think we're going to see the value of the miners, both figuratively and literally, skyrocket. I think you're going to see some movements. For those of you a little more technical, you may be familiar with something called Stratum v2, which allows one method, and there are others, one method for miners not mining pools to create their own templates. I think you're going to see that happen. Financial institutions are going to pay attention. We know BlackRock and Fidelity and Vanguard and these sort of folks are kind of lurking on the sidelines. When they come in, I think they're going to come in hard. I think there's a thought process often that it is the energy companies that will move hard into mining. I think there's some truth to that, but I think it will pale in comparison to the strength with which the financial institutions try to come in and attack mining. And I use the word attack because I think it's something we have to be a little fearful of. So I'll close with one last slide. And I'm almost 60 years old, and but I'm a system designer. I think Bobby told you a little about my background. And I think long term, I believe what we're trying to build is a monetary system for the next 1,000 years. And we often have to step back and not think about today or 2 years from now or a decade from now, but think about much longer time periods. We suffered through the block size war 5, 6 years ago. I believe there will be one more war. I hope I'm wrong. But I believe it will be a block time war, not a block size war. Because if you think back to the thing I started with, there's only really 2 ways to increase the capacity of the network: the block time or the block size. We've already fought the block size war. There will be a point when we hit roughly a decade from now where, for all practical purposes, all the Bitcoin is mined. The subsidy is almost meaningless. And so I believe, and I want you to watch out for this, I believe there will be forces that will say, well, therefore, we can increase the block time from, let's say, 10 minutes to 5 minutes, or decrease it from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. We will not affect the inflation rate of Bitcoin, and we will double the capacity of the network. The financial institutions are going to want to do that because they are going to be beholden to the fees by the mining network, and they're going to want more capacity. Like I said, I mentioned I'm 60 years old. This may happen when I'm in my mid-70s. And so I'm here today, and I will be repeatedly while I'm still here talking to you, because most of you are younger than me. And I want you to be aware of this. I want to preempt the attack vectors and nip these in the bud and not allow this thing to take hold. So I'm making a prediction, as I said, I hope is not true. I am not here to scare anybody. Bitcoin is strong, we are secure, and we will win. So thank you. Well done.
Wow. Bob's 60 years old. Wow, that's really real damn old, Bob. Wait till you get up here, 69. That difference is big. Come on out here. We got a wheel spinner coming here. And what's your name, sir?
Jeffrey Swan.
Got first and last name. That's unusual as hell. Okay, probably trying to...
All right, guys. I'm here with the 2 gentlemen from... First of all, that panel was absolutely mind-blowing. So shout out to... Wait.